You are listening to 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester, New York.
Extreme Independent Radio.
Worldwide, you can find us online at 1009wxir.com.
Infiltrate Radio.
All right, welcome to Infiltrate Radio. Today is July 26, 2018, and this is episode number 13. I don't know if we're supposed to say that. That's an unlucky number, isn't it, Sarah?
Well, maybe.
Well, anyway, I'm Patrick.
And I'm Sarah.
And we're bringing you new music, in-studio guests, and performances, just making your Thursday evenings just that much better. Isn't that right, Sarah?
That is right. We love Thursday.
That's right. So today on the show, we've got the one, the only Mr. Chris Lindstrom from foodabouttown.com. He's got a podcast, a blog, and he does a bunch of food reviews around town, and he's got a podcast of his own. So I'm hoping he's got some stories about his podcast and some guests and some, maybe he'll bring some food too. I'm getting
we like that.
a little hungry. But first up, we've got some music for you, so stay tuned for the interview.
Infiltrate Radio.
All right, so welcome back. We've got in studio right now Chris Lindstrom from foodabouttown.com, amongst other things. We want to welcome you into the studio, Chris.
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate you having me over. It's a beautiful day in Rochester.
It really is, isn't it? It's nice out.
Kind of hard to beat. This is perfect. Well, I take that back. Perfect Rochester weather is fall weather.
Yeah, it's
60-something degrees.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Sunny. That's perfect Rochester. This is pretty damn close, though.
Yeah, it's few and far between that we get these sort of days here.
Absolutely.
What, the sun, you mean?
Yeah,
the sun.
And I think we get
sun, no rain.
Yeah, we get like 2 days a year or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So the last time we saw you, Chris, at least I saw you, Sarah wasn't there for it. You were struggling through the Fiery Flatbread Challenge, which we've talked about on the show, actually, with
nice.
Because we had Tom on the show from Peppernuts.
Awesome. Tom's a cool guy.
So you're recovering. I'm hoping we didn't do any permanent damage.
No, I mean there was some afterburn, and it was a interesting evening. I do recall.
Right.
But it was hard, and when I recorded that with Casey when Casey was there, I told him ahead of time, this is just gonna hurt. And that's your attitude you have to have going into that kind of thing.
And that's exactly probably what happened.
Yeah, it hurt. I did a quarter at a time, a quarter of this flatbread, which was no more than 6 inches. And I did a quarter at a time. It took 5 to 10 minutes between quarters for my mouth to burn down.
And that had the ghost pepper extract on it. Is that what you?
Yeah, so it's got a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's just full of pepper.
Yeah.
It's got the ghost pepper extract. It's got Tom's
his double
ghost
X sauce,
pepper. Yeah,
which
sauce.
I've used a lot at home. I enjoy that sauce. It's fiery, but the extract is what makes it
additional
really
stuff
bad.
We added to it. That's
because we tried all of those sauces and they were hot.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah,
even Sarah's not into hot sauce, and she dug it. So just a reminder here, you're listening to WXIR 100.9 Extreme Independent Radio, and we've got Mr. Chris Lindstrom here on the show. All right, so and I know you were burning last time. Hopefully this stuff doesn't burn you as badly. I have yet to taste it. So if it's terrible, please don't blame me for my tastes in whiskeys.
I've already built that in, and I'm ready to blame you.
Okay, perfect.
I do have to say that the containers are beautiful. They kind of look like paint thinner containers in the best possible way.
Yeah,
they do. That's what I thought it was when I saw them. They're
interesting, right? So we've got two here, and I'll let you guys decide which ones you want to do. I went for the apple, but it's called Stillhouse, America's Finest, and they're both corn whiskey infused with some sort of liqueur. So in this instance, this is a peach tea whiskey, and then that one is I think an apple, right?
Yeah, it says apple crisp, so I'm assuming it's going to have cinnamon, probably along the same lines as Rochester products like Rattlesnake and Rosie's apple pie whiskey from Iron Smoke, or the apple pie moonshine from Black Button. I imagine they're kind of playing that same realm.
Yeah, similar. Let's see. So
this one smells really good. The peach tea whiskey.
The guy at the whiskey store. That would be awesome if there was just a whiskey store.
Note to self.
Yeah. future entrepreneurial endeavor
All
there.
right. Well, I'm gonna do the apple.
Yeah.
pie one.
Go for it.
Sorry, apple
these are
crisp.
these are seltzer here, and if you want more ice, there's some in there that's slowly melting. But let me give it a shot because he said it was drier than what you would expect. So we'll see. Ooh, that's actually really good. That green apple one.
So on the nose, yeah, I'm getting green apple, kind of like the what would you call it? Your green apple Jolly Rancher?
Yeah,
You know, like
that's kind of
candy
what it's
green
like.
Apple.
Should I take a sip straight and then add after?
Absolutely, you should just
see?
do the whole shot right now, Sarah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm being super nerdy, because of course I am, our color is clear, which means this is uncured whiskey. So this is moonshine based.
That's correct. So, for those that don't know, whiskey doesn't necessarily mean that brown liquid. It can be made from. Oh, excuse me. It can be made from. Corn or wheat, but it generally is clear before they actually oak age it, and that's where it gets its color from. So, what do you think of that, Sarah?
That's actually very good.
It's good, right? Like, I think it needs to be mixed with something. I don't know if
So
I could do
it-
shot after shot of it.
It's
but-
hard for me because my taste. I'm a snob first and foremost. I'm honest about my snobbery. For me, the artificial flavors and the thickness
Yep.
of it, because it has a almost syrupy consistency.
Let me see the bottle. Pass me the bottle there. Does it say that there are actually
It's
additives to it or whatever?
I mean, there's definitely sugar added
Yeah,
because
there's
it's
something in it. Well, I think it's the liquor, I should say.
sure.
I don't know, not something I would drink all the time, but I saw the bottles and I was like, oh, that looks really cool.
Oh, beautiful bottles. I mean, I would want to use that as a flask almost,
Yeah.
because it's super well designed too.
A raging alcoholic might be able to keep that in their car and pretend like it's a quart of oil
Yeah, exactly.
if they wanted to. So, not that I'm promoting that, of course. So,
God, no.
so Chris, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know
course.
you've got your podcast and you've got your
Dude.
website and you've got a million other things going on. So, I appreciate you giving us some time here to talk. So, why don't you tell us a little bit? I guess we'll start with Food About Town.
Sure.
And what you do there. And
So I was kind of one of the first blogs here in town. I was a Yelp reviewer back when there was no Yelp community and Yelp wasn't a four-letter word.
right.
And I had done over 200 reviews on Yelp, and I started my own site because I was kind of done with that community. I still like a lot of people over there, but I was kind of done. I started my own site, and then eventually I started doing restaurant reviews for the city newspaper here in town. I did 3 years doing that. And
That's really interesting. I didn't know you did that.
yeah, I did 3 years writing, and I'm an engineer is my career, and that's my mentality.
Sure.
But I'm not a natural writer. I write like an engineer, so
Right.
I'm super technical. I do a lot of research, but flowing writing, maybe not my best quality.
Right.
But the restaurateurs always enjoyed it because if they were doing something well, I knew they were doing something well, and I told people because I'm very specific and
Right.
annoying. Although when they weren't doing things well, they didn't like it because I'm very specific and annoying.
Yeah. So how did you move then from writing there to then making the jump to?
Yeah, so I had been doing the site all along. That's kind of how I got picked up. But the podcast, I've been a radio nerd for a long time. It was one of the ways I learned how to be a better communicating person. I wasn't very good at talking to people, wasn't good at having in-person conversations. And for me, talk radio was huge. This was in the era of Guy Talk Radio through, 2005. And I still listen to some of that stuff because it changed my life. I learned how to have good conversations, learned how to joke around with people without taking offense to everything.
Right.
Because, those people are the worst.
How long have you been doing the podcast now, you said?
Jeez, I think it's been about 5 years now.
5 years. Wow.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how often is the?
So it was sporadic at first. I'm at the point where I'm doing now about 3 a month. So I'm at episode 109, just came out the other day.
Nice.
And my goal this year is to try and get 50 episodes out.
Excellent.
And I'm just behind that pace right now. But I've got some interesting stuff. It's a blast. I absolutely love doing it.
So we're at episode, just so you know, you're on episode number 13
Perfect.
for us.
I like that.
Yeah. Whether
So-
or not you're superstitious.
Yeah, the unlucky number 13.
No,
but
I'm not superstitious. I'm not
Well,
I'm not horoscopic.
You're an engineer, right?
So it's
Exactly.
just a number.
It's a good number as far as I'm concerned.
It's perfect. It's just a number of episodes that have
yes.
been done.
Exactly.
That is true.
It's very accurate.
Excellent. So you said 109 you've
Yeah.
done. Holy mackerel. So how long typically is your show? Is
I
it?
do an hour. Now that's typical. If one goes shorter because of time, or I'm just talking by myself, I've started doing that a bit more recently. I don't care. I've done some as long as 3 hours with a couple guys.
Yeah.
I had Michael Warren Thomas on, who's sort of a Rochester food talk radio legend.
Yeah.
He does 5 hours every weekend
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
on WYSL. And I had David Lane from David Lane Design, who does leather work.
Oh, yeah.
We did
I
3
know him.
hours.
Oh, really? With
Yeah.
him about leather work?
It was whatever we were talking about, because we're just those kind of guys. We can talk about whatever we want.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
we've found as we've been doing the show, and you're listening to it on 100.9 WXIR Extreme Independent Radio. So as we're doing the show, we have on the FM broadcast, we have music along with the interviews that kind of get cut off, and then we continue it onto a podcast form.
that's
so
awesome.
it goes from a little bit of the interview to a long form podcast style. During it, but we found in the beginning we were like, okay, can we fill up 20 25 minutes with the guests, and it ended up being these hour long hour and a half long conversations we'd have with people, and they were just so interesting that I'm like, oh, we got to keep this, which is how the podcast kind of spurred out of it.
Yeah, when you get interesting people over, it's 20 minutes seems like nothing. I mean, it's the thing about, and we're on the radio, which is great. It's great to get broadcast to all these people, but the detriment is you can only do so much programming in an hour, and typically the style is very quick.
Yeah.
And my preference is to do long form interviews so we can really noodle around and get to things. Really flow through and have a conversation. That's what it's all about for me.
Yeah, and
So-
it evolves.
Absolutely.
We never have an agenda. It just evolves. It takes on its own life.
Yeah, we did in the beginning. We definitely had set topics or set things that we would try and hit throughout it. And as we go on, we're like, hey, as soon as we get a little booze involved with it, we're good to go, and we don't really need to have a
Yeah, that's
predetermined thing.
That's been great.
But I'm assuming that because is it Food About Town? That's the podcast name as
Yeah,
well.
same thing. It's on all the things: iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher.
So if someone was to just search for Food About Town
Yep,
on there,
shows up on everything.
they'd come up. Awesome.
Absolutely.
So do you typically start out with a guest that's centered around food, or do you just kind of get guests in there that aren't necessarily from the food world, maybe in some way?
Yeah, I don't mind a tangential person. Of course, most of the people I have over are more directly related. So the nice thing about the food world is it's very interesting. It's very diverse. You can get stuff all the way from chefs to restaurant owners to food truck people, sommeliers, distillers, beer makers, people that write about food. I can do direct and have tons of different options.
Right.
But yeah, sure. I talk to people that aren't directly related either.
I find I've been bringing on a lot of food related people just because I'm in that world outside of the radio situation. I'm just obsessed with food, and I like alcohol, and obviously that's why I opened up a bar that has food.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but I found that a lot of our guests seem to be tending in that way. I did reach out just recently to Jordan Peterson's publicist to see if I can get him on, because he's I don't know if you know this, but
I do know Jordan
he's
Peterson.
coming into town in September at
It's
some
not
point.
that long out, right?
So yeah, I don't know
Did you
how.
get a response?
I didn't get a response yet, but we'll see.
I imagine if he's doing interviews in town, he's probably doing Evan Dawson,
Yeah.
if anybody.
Yeah, that might be. I mean, he definitely. I saw some interview with him where he wanted to go. He was saying he's done doing edited interviews, which is why I thought this might be a good kind of
Yeah, for sure.
venue, because while I'm on the radio, I go into a podcast. So
Yeah.
we'll see. I'm not banking on that happening, but
Hey, you never know. He
we'll
could
see.
be sitting right here.
I tried that when Alton Brown was in town, and I failed miserably
Oh,
trying
did
to
you?
get Alton Brown over.
he didn't have any.
Did he respond to you at
No,
all?
God,
No. That
Oh,
same
not
thing
even
with
a
Eddie
response,
Izzard.
right?
Never
Yeah.
responded to me.
I'm sure they get tons of requests all the time when they're on the road. And, all I'm ever hoping for is to get one here or there.
Yeah, yeah.
And, try something different. Who cares?
Yeah.
Gotta try.
It'll happen. So pass me some of that peach whiskey there.
Yeah,
Let me try
go for
some
it.
of this. What are you thinking about that? Is that your first trial of this peach?
Just tried
at this
that.
point? Is it similar to that Jolly Rancher?
Same kind of thing, except for when you're talking about fake peach flavor, it's so distinct.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's worse or better than the apple because the apple flavor. But as soon as you taste it, you're going to know that peach flavor too.
I did check out their
smells like it.
their Instagram page as well, and there's a lot of young people jumping into pools, partying, that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of what the target market is for
That's a
for their
problem
product.
me.
I didn't see. All I saw was the
Yeah,
bottle.
but why
when I
would
walked
they
in.
design their?
It's good. I mean, it's good
It's
for
this like
that
old
purpose.
Americana
Yeah,
kind of design of a paint thinner.
Right, it looks like Milwaukee Tools is the
Right,
same font
yeah.
almost.
I do like the peach better.
Yeah, see, it tastes like the oatmeal packets.
Yeah.
The peaches and cream oatmeal
Yeah.
packets. It tastes exactly like that. I do have to go back though to the concept of the people jumping into lakes and people having fun. It's really not on brand for me. I've discovered recently that I don't like fun. I love joking around. I like having a good time. I hate fun.
So fun is off-brand for
No,
Chris Lindstrom.
Fun is definitely off
No
brand.
fun. Write that down.
And I hate
I'm writing
antics. Antics are the
No
worst.
fun.
Antics.
No antics.
You don't like antics?
No, I
What
hate
about
antics.
shenanigans though? Because that has happened.
See, I take you for a shenanigans kind of guy.
No, shenanigans are okay, but antics, it's just not. They're not for me.
I don't know. I don't know. We've been about town and we've done a lot of antics and shenanigans,
That's
so I don't
true.
know.
See, I think my least favorite thing in the world is wooing and people that are. Everything seems forced because that's never my natural state. Is fun. Like I like having conversations. I like joking around. It's not natural for me to go woo and have a good time. It's not my style. I don't enjoy it. It seems fake to me.
So to those just tuning in now, we've got Chris Lindstrom on, this is 100.9 WXIR Extreme Independent Radio, and he just explained how much he is not, how fun is off-brand for him.
100%.
So I don't think that's true because you were part of the this fiery flatbread challenge. You're here drinking with us now.
course.
That says something for your level of antics that you're willing to
I
get
like
into.
good times, Patrick. I like good times.
Not forced fun and no antics.
Exactly.
So here's something that's interesting about you. So you've done 109 episodes now of the podcast,
Yeah.
right? What would you say your main part of that? Is it the podcast? Is it the social media aspect of it? Is it the website? Is it the blogging? Like what do you feel is your main business?
So now it's definitely the podcast first and foremost. I'm not good at social media, and it's probably what holds me back the most from growing what I'm doing. Is I'm not good at it in that I'm not consistent at it, which is the most important thing for social media.
Yeah.
Is consistency. I like writing, and truthfully, I get more views on written pieces talking about new restaurants or food truck rodeos or whatever than I ever get on listens on the podcast. But I don't. It's harder for me to do it because one, I like having people over and talking to them. That's a huge driver for me. And two, I just like doing the podcast more than I like writing. It's more fun to me. I have a better time. I think the guests have a better time.
I feel like too with regards to the mediums that are out there right now for expression, like it used to be like, oh, if you don't read books all the time, then there's while I enjoy reading, I'll be perfectly honest, I'd prefer to listen to an audiobook in the time in between the millions of things I'm doing in my car, and have someone just reading it to me as I'm listening to it. And I think that's why podcasts have become so popular, is because you get to have these in-depth conversations, and I don't know what podcast you listen to, but I'll ask you here in a second, like what some of your favorites are. But I think that's why it's taken off so much, is because there's this disconnect from the day-to-day conversations, I guess, because everyone's looking at their phones, right? So they can sit in their car or be doing these other things while listening to human, conversations and interactions.
Absolutely.
So what are some of your favorite podcasts that you listen to?
So I'm actively subscribed and almost caught up on 40 or more podcasts.
40, you said?
Yeah, ish. Some of them are daily, some of them are weekly, some of them are more sporadic. They go in seasons.
Wow.
But it might be 40 ones that are active that I'm caught up on at any given moment in time. Which is crazy. I listen to everything at 2.25 speed plus.
I've seen that too, because you can actually speed up. You probably don't know this, Sarah, right?
Speed up their
but
voices?
You can speed up, so you can listen to it faster.
So they sound like...
So, like, for instance, if it's a 3-hour podcast, you can listen to it in an hour and a half.
But their voices sound weird.
Yeah, their voices will be... I mean, it's not that bad.
It's not pitched up. It's just compressed. Like, it just goes faster. It's like you're fast-forwarding on a DVD.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that your brain gets used to really quickly, but it's... I'll play it in the car now. Like, the wife, when we're sitting in the car, we're driving, we listen at 1.5. When I'm listening, I listen to 2.25 plus, means it also takes gaps between words and removes them.
So it's just one long word.
Yeah.
It compresses it. It's still there, and it's weird how quickly, like, I can listen to almost everything at 2.25 speed and I don't lose anything. But some of my favorites.
I think some audiobooks will let you do that too if you want to listen to an audiobook. I have.
Audible does that.
What would Jordan Peterson's voice sound like in that speaking?
Sarah can't say it. She's like, it sounds like Kermit the Frog.
Oh yes, he does.
But it's his voice is on so much in the house that I'm sleeping and I wake up and it's
because I'll listen
still
to
talking.
I'll watch like the YouTube like his YouTube lectures. Sure. I actually enjoy not necessarily his interviews. I mean, while his interviews are good, I like watching his actual psychology lectures from when he was in college, because he's actually teaching a lesson plan.
I'm sure his academic stuff is fine. I find him very disagreeable.
Yeah, he's definitely not an agreeable.
No, I don't find his thoughts agreeable. I don't find him personally agreeable when I've heard him interviewed, and I've heard him, seen interviews with him that are written. Yeah. I find him extremely disagreeable, but he's exceedingly popular, and he's really caught on to an audience. There's no doubt.
Well, so he's got. He's a psychologist, right? Mm-hmm. And so he really dives pretty deep into like the psychology of the subjects that he's talking about or whatever. So I just find that extremely interesting. As Sarah drops ice on the floor here.
This is the Ice Sounds Radio.
So what can you name like one or two maybe that you listen to?
Oh, of course. So the big one for me, I mean, everybody listens to it, but This American Life. Really taught me about narrative storytelling, and I listen to a lot of shows that are like spin-offs of that or of that style. So a lot of the shows on Gimlet are fantastic, from Startup to what's the other one? There's a show about the internet that's fantastic that they do that I really enjoy.
I don't think I've listened to This American Life before.
This American Life is an amazing. It's been going on for over, almost 20 years. I think it was over 20 years now. I went back. I'm a kind of a completist. I went back and listened to every episode of the show from the beginning. And there's a lot of stories on there I don't care for, but there's so much curated, amazing storytelling there. A lot of Americana.
Is it like different people?
Absolutely. So they bring in, it's like, could be investigative journalism, could be fictional writers, could be somebody telling sort of like a one-man story, and it's everything from just the most homespun stuff to investigative, hard-hitting journalism. And it's pivoted over time. It was probably more homespun at the beginning, and now it's more investigative journalism, but it's super well done and always professional. And
I also heard the Radio Lab.
Radio Lab's amazing.
So I've heard that's good too. I haven't listened to it.
It's one of the best made shows in podcasting.
Like production-wise?
Production-wise. It feels like an experience. So there's a lot of shows in the This American Lifestyle where there's music going in the background and it's very tightly produced. But Radio Lab almost has this experimental feel where they're playing with noises in your head. Huh. So it's more integrated and more, I don't know how to call it. The audio has a feel to it more than just, hey, it's a story with
Right. In the background.
It's more of an experience of audio. It's really super well done.
Huh. So, and for those just tuning in here, we've got Chris Lindstrom here from Food About Town and a few other things that you're doing that maybe we can talk to after we break for the podcast, which we might get into. But so what have you learned from doing, 109 episodes, right? Like, what would you say? I mean, we're now at episode number 13. So what would you say from your point of view? Something you picked up at episode, let's say 50 or 75, that you're like, oh man, I wish I knew that back in the...
Yeah, you know what you pick up is pacing, and it's something you don't know how to do right away. Something you start feeling more comfortable with is how to read the person across the table from you, how to engage in a conversation. You find sometimes when you have things written down that it's problematic, that you start to feel more robotic, and you're not really actively listening to the person that you're talking to.
Right.
And that's something I've gotten better at. I'm a much better interviewer than I was at the beginning.
Right.
Because most of the things I talk about it still is an interview, but I want to make it feel less like an interview than any interview the person's doing.
Right.
And that's something I think I've gotten a lot better at. And when I get the chance to have people over that are either professional broadcasters, I had Evan Dawson on for 2 hours.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I was on his show, I think it was once or twice. It was in like a panel for something. I forget. I think it was about cider or alcohol in town or whatever it was. But he's great. I like him quite a bit.
He's really well done. He's a professional. And I got him for 2 hours. I got to talk about his wine book. And then I did a full hour about interviewing him about interviewing.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to download that then.
Yeah. I thought it was one of the best ones I've done, but he's a great guest. But I also had the chance to really interview somebody that doesn't get a chance to get interviewed very often.
Right.
And those kind of experiences, like the last one I put out, episode 109, was I got to interview 3 of the owners of Joe Bean Coffee, which right next door to where you are. And nobody had done that before. I got to tell a comprehensive history of the business.
Yeah, the story of it.
And I love doing stuff like that. And I think now that I take a look back and look at big picture things that I like telling stories about, I want to do more of that. Some of those big picture stories. And then the other thing, I'm trying to learn how to be better talking on my own and try to do a half an hour without somebody else in the room.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to do, because speaking of another podcast, Bill Burr, listen
amazing.
Like any of his comedy, he's going to also be in town soon too.
I saw.
We just got some tickets to go see him, but he does that alone in his room. He just talks for, I forget how long is his podcast, like an hour?
I think he used to, I used to listen to it. I don't listen to it anymore.
He has one, I think, on Mondays. It's like an hour and
hour and a half.
And then he does a Thursday, which is like 20 minutes, which that's crazy just to talk.
It's amazing.
I think
for an hour.
He loves that. That's his element. Because he can just say whatever.
How has that experience been for you, like changing to like just you talking?
Yeah, I haven't done it a ton yet, so it's still awkward. I try to do, what I've found is I'll pick topics, and I can do 10 minutes pretty easy. 10 minutes on a topic. Because I know where I'm going, I've got an angle. I'm not like bantering with myself. I think that's the hardest part, is it's when you don't have somebody to go against, you need to continue a conversation. You almost have to push and pull. And it can't just be, hey, here's my thoughts. It needs to be, here's the thread I'm going on, and you need to like wiggle around the thread and not just say, hey, here's what I think.
Do you go in with like a specific topic or something when you do those type of episodes?
I think you kind of have to. I don't think you can just sit down and noodle for an hour unless you're just like, your mind vibrates at a very high frequency of anger, like Bill Burr's does.
Yeah, Bill Burr is like on a new topic every 20 seconds. He has no rhyme or reason where he's going.
Kind of just jump from.
He does. He does it consistently.
It's funny too, because I don't think I can necessarily go on unless I have some sort of like topic. I guess if you have like certain news stories are going on or whatever, you just have little notes about like, all right, I want to talk about this or that. So for those just tuning in here, we've got Chris Lindstrom here from Food About Town, and he's also got his podcast, Food About Town, as well. Let me ask you this: what was, I guess, one of your favorite or most interesting guests that you've had on? Or I guess, I don't know if you've already said it, but something where maybe it was an unexpected, like, you thought it was just going to be, another episode, and it turned out to be like, holy mackerel, this was a great.
Yeah, there's a few that kind of changed my perspective on things. One, I had a couple sommeliers over from Farmers Creekside Tavern and Inn out in Leroy.
Nice.
It was Drew Shabbat and Chris Crocky, who's moved on from that place, but Drew's still there. One of my favorite places in the Rochester region, but they brought over 3 different wines, and we talked about wine for an hour.
What was the name of it?
It's called Farmers Creekside Tavern and Inn. It's on Main Street in Leroy, right on the creek. Fantastic place, really well.
And they have food and stuff too.
Yeah, full food menu. The chef Sean Wolf is dynamic. He's just a fantastic chef. But I had Drew and Chris over, and we talked wine. And I had started my journey into wine, but having them over and really diving into it heavy kind of just spurred me on and made me want to become more and more of a nerd about it.
Right.
Which is fantastic.
Sommeliers can be a little intimidating too when they start talking about wines, because they're so in depth about what they're tasting and what, as they're describing stuff. What I've learned from doing the cider thing too is that a lot of the things that seem overwhelming, once you kind of know what they are, like for instance tannin, right? Once you know what tannin is, and I usually describe it as like the feeling of having like and this is kind of funny, but a used black tea bag, if you put that on your tongue, how it sucks all the moisture out of your mouth, and how that lends, complexity to it. It starts to not be so intimidating.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where now if I'm tasting wine, I can tell if it was like, did they crush it with the stems on? I can taste that now.
Right.
And it's annoying, but that's also that's my wheelhouse. That's my wheelhouse. That's what I enjoy. Like, my favorite places are like Joe Bean Coffee, one of my favorite places. Like when I went into your place, the selection of European stuff and all the esoteric weird ciders.
Yeah.
One of my other favorite episodes, I went down to South Hill Cider.
Yeah. They're great.
I met Steve Sellen. What a cool guy. I brought my portable rig down to his woodworking shop at his place.
Nice.
And we recorded in his woodworking shop where he makes string instruments. And we walked through his fields, got caught in a rainstorm, then went back into his woodworking studio and recorded live at his place.
Oh, that's pretty cool,
man. It was awesome. And what a cool guy. He's super engaging and, interesting story. He makes some great products too. I really enjoy his ciders.
So, before we get any further here, we've got Chris Lindstrom here on from Food About Town, and we're going to go ahead and switch into podcast mode here for those people listening that want to hear the rest of the interview. We'll probably go on for a good while. We got plenty of whiskey left over. So, for those that want to listen, please download our podcast on just search for Infiltrate Radio Podcast on any of your favorite podcast mechanisms. And Chris, thank you for being on the broadcast here, and everyone else, tune in there. And right now we've got some music coming up for you. All right, Chris. So now we're in full-fledged podcast mode.
I can feel the difference.
We're in the real world.
The level just dropped.
I can feel it. It's like one of those, what are those kids? Is this EDM music where things drop?
Yes.
Yes, it's exactly like that.
Yeah. The thing just dropped, and then it's just going to go big, and it's going to be exciting, and all that kind of stuff.
It.
So this is where we get down and dirty with the real stuff.
I can feel the excitement.
So let's talk about Frankly.
Yes.
Let's talk frankly.
Let's do that.
About Frankly.
I like that.
So you started talking about this before we started the show. So can you explain to me a little bit about, is this something you can talk about?
Of course. Yeah, we have the website startup is called Frankly. It's PHRANKLY.com. You can tell I've done this a couple times.
Yeah.
We are a startup. We're out of the former high-tech Rochester space in the Sibley building, which is now Next Core.
Nice.
That's NEXTCORPS. Not saying I'm the biggest fan of the name, but it's the name of the place. It is what it is. It's a co-working space and a business incubator, and we are out of there. And our website, we're trying to do transparency in sourcing and distribution of food and drink products. Basically answering the question, where can I buy this product in the store? and also where are your restaurants buying from? What farms are they buying from? What products are they buying? And
are you trying to make that available then to like regular consumers?
Absolutely.
That's a great idea.
It's available to people. We're already partnered with Headwater Food Hub here in Rochester.
Perfect.
And we have a ton of information already out there about all the farms that restaurants are buying from. We're also partnered with a number of other local restaurants that have signed themselves up and added information, like Marty's Meats,
nice,
Fuego Coffee, Ugly Duck Coffee, lots of places.
We had Paul Guglielmo from the Brother Reed show.
Yo, Polly G.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was just before he released the Marty's sauce or whatever, so he had brought it in here before he released it, so we got a chance to taste some of it. And as a matter of fact, we still have a little bit of it.
They are so
Nice.
good.
There's like remnants of it in our refrigerator of those sauces, but they're great. I love Marty because we had him to his food truck out at our grand opening like anniversary party.
Yeah, Marty's a great guy. Paul I'm getting to be better friends with, and I really like him. He's a hustler.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that in somebody. I mean, he's doing so many different things, and he really cares. He's one of those guys. Once you get to know him, he can come across as a hustler.
Yeah.
Because he is, but he's a really genuine guy. Really good to hang out with. I really enjoy him.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that gets sometimes people can I guess be offended by people that are doing a lot of stuff like that is their time is super limited, and so when they give you time, they want to be all about like what is this interaction? How am I going to condense the amount of
Hold on, we're making podcast
or
noises.
reduce it
Hold
or
on.
distill? How do you like that?
Hold on a second. We're making podcast noises.
Oh, it didn't even work.
Oh, come on.
Rewind.
Here, you have to open
This
that one
one.
if she put it on tight enough.
No, I didn't.
Come on.
Sorry.
But distilling the time to the most efficient use of that time to whatever the business is, because I find myself doing that too, where like I'll have a conversation and I'll end up just being, it'll feel very transactional, even though in my mind it doesn't feel that way. It feels like, okay, this is really all we had to do during that time, so that's
We're done. Let's go.
and like go do what you got to do, because I'm sure you're busy doing your thing, but Paulie, I could tell, is very, very similar in
he
that.
Definitely can be. I think because he's got a full-time radio gig, he's got the sauce thing, and those are both time-consuming and difficult hours to be involved.
And he's got a family too, so it takes quite a bit of time. So
and I may or may have not offended him when he was here, and I did not mean to do that.
Speaking of busy people, so Sarah, has a full-time day job. She's just a million things, just like all of us, right? And so while he was talking, she had a couple of drinks. At this point, we were in the podcast mode, and she kind of started to like she was listening to him, but started to like go off into. And he's like,
called me out on it.
He's like, are you falling asleep?
He's like, I'm sorry that I'm boring you. I was like,
oh, that's great.
And that's not at all what was happening.
Yeah, it wasn't.
That makes me really happy.
It wasn't intended. He was very interesting. It was one of those days where I had been up since 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was really trying to listen. And then the more I listened, I was like, his voice was like, it was like a lullaby.
But I do like having brought like people that are in radio
Absolutely.
on, because sometimes you feel like almost when you have a guest on too, you kind of have to like drag their stories out of them a little bit because they're not used to talking about themselves so much.
It's weird, right? I mean, I used to be terrible at it, but it's something I really worked on. And now if I sit down, I don't need prep. You don't need to tell me what you're talking about. I'll talk about anything. I will give honest opinions, and I'll talk about me. I'll talk about anything because I'm an open book. I don't really care anymore.
So the frankly.com thing,
Yeah.
just to get back from the tangent we just went on.
I love tangents.
So your goal here is to basically are you linking to it? Are you selling directly through the site? Like what's the actual?
So the base part's free, and it's always going to be free, kind of like Yelp. You can always list yourself on Yelp, but if you want to integrate our live information onto your website, we're charging a monthly fee for that. We're also building other features where you can, promote your business on our website. And our goal really is to, have some accountability for if you're saying something about where you're buying from. Well, on our site, the farmer has a chance to say, well, no, you don't buy from us anymore. And they can either take it off your page or have us do it. And
interesting.
And there's actual accountability for the businesses that are listing with us, which is great for businesses that actually do this well.
Right.
And also answers the question, and Paul is a great example. I've got all his stores that he's selling to on my site.
Nice.
And it answers that question with a live map located to where you are and where can you buy Paul's sauce right now.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And
So that's a great tool. I mean, and then
absolutely.
and then basically it would be a service that you would be.
Absolutely. Anybody can use it. Anybody can link to it for free. And if you want to put it on your website, we're charging. And if you want different integration, we're working on stuff like that. But, we're bootstrapping the whole thing too.
Yeah.
We're 5 guys, all have full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And this is my other side gig
Right.
on top of my 45-plus hour a week day job.
Yeah.
And my dangerous curling habit.
Curling?
Yes, curling.
Come again?
Yeah.
Like the ice sport?
So,
I've
do
been
you go to
playing-
the curling club over here?
I do.
There's a curling club here?
There is a curling
I'm
club.
I do.
fascinated.
Are you surprised that I know about that?
Where is it?
No, because more people know about it than I'd think because it's been around for over 50 years.
All right.
Here in
Nobody
Rochester.
told me about this.
Curling club. So
I've been playing for over 13 years now.
let's talk about curling. Chris.
Let's curl.
I want to try.
So I'm sure there are a bunch of interesting facts about curling.
Tons.
I think the majority of the people out there are going to have a question somewhere in this world of questioning. Can you explain curling to us
Of course.
and how it actually works?
So that is an easy question for me because it's
Not
hard.
the physics of how it happens,
The physics are actually really complicated.
but are there rules?
Yes, many rules.
And then is there a special broom,
There is.
or is it just any random broom?
And I own my own broom. I own my own curling shoes.
Excellent.
What about curling pants?
I use golf pants because they're stretchy. So I have like Under Armour golf pants.
Okay.
The flexibility is important because curling is a lot of different things. There's static motion in that you're holding sort of a deep lunge when you're delivering the stone. So there's core strength, there's accuracy. It's kind of like, they call it chess on ice. There's a lot of strategy, and it also has a lot of golf elements in that there's always constant improvement. Everything matters. Every little motion matters. Every, your delivery pattern matters. The way you set yourself up matters. And then the sweeping is a sprint with your arms.
So
It is super athletic.
the point of curling is to potentially kind of like shuffleboard, to push it just far enough to either get into a scoring thing,
Correct.
like an area.
There's a circle about 120 feet away from where you're delivering your stone, which is a 45-pound piece of granite.
And I heard that all of these stones too are gotten from the same area. Am I accurate in that?
Yeah, there's an island off of Scotland where they are generally manufactured from. I believe they found a place in China that has similar quality that they're probably going to end up getting them from eventually because it's an island. There's only so much of it there. But yeah, so it's the stones.
And I'm guessing that has to do with the density of the particular piece of granite, right?
That's absolutely correct. So they actually use 2 different kinds of granite in a stone. So the main body of the stone is one kind, and they actually have a insert that screws into the bottom where it actually hits the ice on. It's a different density of granite that's better, doesn't fall apart as easily from constant friction, and is a little more waterproof. The top part is better at not fracturing when they strike each other. So that's a big part of it because they need to last a long time.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing that you go into curling, right? And you have either the person, what would be the person pushing the stone?
So whoever's shooting at the time. So a team is 4 people for most curling events. I'm not talking about mixed doubles or other curling. We're talking about regular classic curling. There's 4 people on each team. Everybody shoots twice in each end, and there's typically 8 ends in a game. So each person basically shoots 16 times in a game. And you go in order, so the first person will shoot first, second, third, fourth, typically, and we're not talking about all the different stuff, because that's confusing enough for me.
Right.
But that's the typical, and each person has their own role. So the first two guys, they end up sweeping more often. The third guy, he's kind of the intermediary between the captain of the team, the skip, and the front end, who are the first two guys. And he calls the last shots.
Yeah, because he's yelling, right, the whole time?
That's me.
Okay.
So I'm the skip. I'm the captain. I dictate the team's strategy. I'll decide on the lineups, whatever else.
I'm going to need you to call me Skip from now on, Sarah.
And so I dictate all that stuff. I do the yelling when I'm asking people to sweep.
Right.
And I can do it very intently at times. And it's a very complicated game. There's always changing things. You need to keep track of so many different things all at the same time. So for any given game, the ice changes because you're running pieces of granite over ice.
Right.
So it changes. You get different paths in the ice. You have to analyze how fast the ice is running, how much it's curling, what kind of delivery do your teammates have.
Where does the name curling... So you just mentioned the ice.
Yes.
Curling.
Yeah, I heard that.
So the way every shot you take is not a direct line. Every shot moves on a parabola, if we're being engineering and math.
Yeah.
So it moves on a curve. So you don't shoot in a direct line. I'm moving stuff on the table now.
Right.
You move stuff in an arc. Depending on how fast you throw the stone, it curls less as you shoot faster.
Huh.
But the ice has a big thing to do with that. How they add the pebble to the ice. So it's not like hockey ice where it's smooth and you just fall all over the place. It's actually textured. They take basically a water backpack with a sprinkler on it, and they had little droplets of water on top in different sizes.
Huh.
And then they cut it to a certain consistency to try and get a speed of the ice that's consistent and a curl that's consistent. So what they're trying to do is say, hey, we want 3.65 second ice draw to the button, which you didn't understand anything what I just said.
No, I completely understand.
But basically, it's a time. It's a time how you measure how fast something is going.
Yeah.
And you can say, hey, if you shoot this fast every time, generally you're going to get to this spot. So you're trying to make the ice consistent speed, and you probably want 4 feet of curl. So that means if you aim 4 feet away from the center, it'll end up in the center when it's done moving.
So that's kind of like a golf or even bowling too, kind of similar, you know.
Absolutely.
It curls. So what made you get into curling? Like, how did that happen?
I grew up in Buffalo, so I'm almost honorary Canadian.
Right.
But my dad grew up watching it on TV because we got Canadian TV, and he introduced it to me when I was a kid. So we used to watch the Canadian men's and women's national championships on TV. And I found out I went to the U of R for college here because I'm smart with math and stupid because I went to a college that I couldn't afford.
Right.
And I went here, and after college...
Don't worry, you're not the only one.
Yeah,
No.
same here.
Yeah.
Same here.
And I was stupid enough not to have rich parents.
That's the
Same
worst part. Yeah.
here.
That's where you got to start. You got to have the rich
Yeah.
parents first.
Yeah, it's a lot easier when you have those and they can pay for your college.
Yeah. Or they tell you, don't worry about it. And you're 17 and think, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
And you just want to get out of the house.
And again, I'm not complaining that much. I'm a upper middle class white male in America. Everything's pretty good for me.
Yeah.
So I grew up watching it, and after I graduated, I started my job, and some guys at work were playing. And I started up playing, and I kept on going. Everybody else ended up quitting, and now I'm still there because I just love it, and if it's a sport I'm good at.
So Sarah looks like she has some questions about curling, specifically about pants.
Yes,
No,
Sarah.
I'm just really curious because the last time I saw curling on TV, everybody had very interesting pants on or pantaloons.
Did they?
Oh, so we're talking about the Norwegian curling team?
Possibly,
I'd
but
say
they were
yes, you
very
are.
fancy looking, and I was like, "What is this?"
So do the Norwegians wear different pants?
I
They
saw
do.
some plaid,
Yep.
lots of plaid, and then like matching sweaters and outfits.
So the Norwegian team, they started I don't know about a trend, but they ended up partnering with Loudmouth Golf. So they make ugly golf pants, basically.
Yeah.
and they started wearing Norwegian flag pants. And the pants only got more garish from there, and that's kind of Loudmouth's brand. And they got a huge following. Actually, a guy from Rochester made a Facebook page. This was 3 Olympics ago. And he had, I think he had over 1 million Facebook followers on the curling pants page
Yeah.
on Facebook.
That's
And there was a guy from Rochester who had
what
that
I
page.
think about when I hear the word curling is pants.
Yeah, I know. It's a weird thing to think about.
But they make
but
golf stuff too, huh?
Yeah, they're actually really popular. Most of it's really hideous stuff, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And the other big thing people know curling for now is that in the last Olympics that just finished this last winter, the U.S. won the gold medal in men's curling, which is the first time they've ever won a gold medal.
Is this something you might be going for? Is
Oh, God, no.
Olympic gold medal curling?
No, you know what? I can be regionally competitive.
Right.
And if I
where were they out of? Do you know where they were out of?
most of them are out of Minnesota, and
Makes sense.
that's
Yeah.
typical. Minnesota is our biggest area of curling in the U.S., so most of the guys are out of Minnesota, Wisconsin, those kind of areas. And there's actually a few others that are pretty big, like Seattle's actually pretty big, and we've got pretty good concentration here in the Northeast. But for the level of effort that I'm currently putting into it, I can't be more than regionally competitive. I would need to be practicing 3 days a week, 3-4 days a week, playing 3 days a week.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever met anyone that actually goes and does it. I've seen the curling club here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it would be really interesting. But I don't think I could just walk in there, right, and just be like, hey guys, I'm here to start curling.
No,
like,
they have intro nights and learn to curl events.
I tell you what, it would be a great date night to take a girl on to go curling, because they'd be like, no one's ever done that, right?
Yeah,
Take a girl if you're going out on a date, like where?
That's true.
Restaurant, you go to a movie, you go to like bowling or whatever or something. You take them curling,
Yes.
then they'll
So,
marry you.
I do have an anecdote, and so I have 3 separate stories regarding that because you just popped up 3 things in my head.
Right.
One, that's actually true. I met my wife at curling.
Really?
Yes.
See? I know
So-
what I'm talking about.
So
here,
I met
Sarah.
my wife at curling, and
She was so impressed. She's like, look at that.
This is why I have a radio show, Sarah. I
No.
can tell
you
immediately.
just got it.
Oh.
No, I was on a team with her friend at the time, and her friend told her that, if I was a few years younger, I definitely want to date him, but you should come here and meet him. So she brought her to meet me specifically, and I remember she was sitting in the warm room area, which is where people can watch games. She started making faces at me from up there, and we started dating. And,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and went from there.
So were you like, sort of like when someone teaches, like, because I've seen people go on dates at like golf courses and stuff too, where you go behind her. This is how you curl. And you,
I mean, you
go,
definitely could. I remember I popped her on the butt once with my broom.
right.
This was before we started dating.
That's what they're calling it these days, Sarah.
Yeah,
The young kids.
it was the style at the time. Yeah, and so we ended up meeting at curling. But the interesting thing about what you're talking about is everybody who goes there for the first time looks ridiculous.
Sure.
Because, like, if I went with somebody for a first date, it'd be a very different experience because I can just show up. I haven't curled in, a few months now
Yep.
because our season runs through the wintertime. But I could show up right now and I would look like I know what I'm doing because I do.
Yeah.
If you two showed up and tried it, you would both be falling all over the place, no
I
matter
would.
your athleticism.
I would. I'd be doing a split. I'd fall over.
So are there shoes? Is there like cleats that you have to wear or whatever?
So it's actually the opposite. So yes, there are shoes. I own curling shoes. And one of the shoes actually has Teflon on it because that's what you slide on when you're delivering the stone. So it has 2 pieces of Teflon on the shoe, and so it reduces your friction, and you can slide more smoothly down the ice when you're delivering the stone.
Interesting.
The other shoe has rubber on it, and you put a little galoshes on the Teflon.
And that's for
when
the
you're walking.
people
When
that
you're
are brooming.
the broomers? Is it
sweepers.
sweepers?
Sweepers.
The
yep.
sweepers.
Now, the fanciest people, they will do it without the gripper on, and they will have the Teflon while they're sweeping. They're better than me. I'm not that good.
Right. So all in all,
Yes.
with and we'll go from curling. I just thought it was interesting.
No, it's great.
I've never spoken to anyone that's done curling. So overall with your blog, I mean, was there a food experience in particular that was overwhelming or that was maybe underwhelming?
So plenty of underwhelming ones. I mean, I've written when I was writing for the city newspaper, it was nobody else really wrote negative here in Rochester.
Right.
I did. It was the only way I would agree to write for the newspaper. Is I think it's really important if you're going to write reviews, you need to be able to be critical,
Right.
and not beating around the bush and be actively critical when things are bad. So I wrote a few negative reviews in my day.
Is that something that city newspaper was not necessarily into, even though they had agreed to it, or was it something they didn't?
No,
they found was like, oh, this
they
is
were good about
actually
it.
good.
They never caused me any problems. They always backed me up. I remember on a few occasions where the restaurants reached out to them and told them how displeased they were about
Right.
the review. It happened 2 or 3 times, and none of those restaurants are still in existence.
Yeah.
So it turns out I was right. No, it was, and it's not because of that, of course. It was, I had honest critiques, and I could back up everything I said. I had pictures, I could tell you details about why it was wrong, because I know food, and I could tell you honestly why you did this wrong, and there's no excuse to not do things well.
So with
I
regards,
can tell you good stuff too.
yeah. So let's hear a little bit about the good stuff. But I also want your opinion on, because I could sense a little bit of an opinion on the Yelp thing, and I don't know if you want to get into that at all.
No, I don't. I'll
But first,
talk about
I
anything.
guess some of the good things. So like, what was like something that was like, oh man, that was really good.
So, I mean,
was
I
unexpected.
have amazing meals all the time. And because I take a lot of time and effort to find the best of places and find things that I really enjoy, I remember the first things I wrote reviews about, I was on a business trip in scenic Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I wrote on Yelp, because that's where I started, I was miserable there, and I found places that treated me really well. And I needed to write about them, and I found Yelp, and I started writing.
Was this just you were living there, or
I was in there for like a couple months at a time for business trips, and I just didn't like being there.
Right.
It didn't suit me, and I was miserable in general at that point in my life. So I found places that treated me really well, and it was, here was this wood-fired pizza place, here was this tea shop, and like the tea shop locals didn't go to. And I'm like, how are people not going here? This is great. They treated me really nicely. And I started writing, and that kind of thing carries through. Like some of my favorite things I've found, you go to these, go to the West Coast, you go to San Francisco, obviously the density of food there is fantastic.
Yeah.
My goal is to find the best of here and try and let people know. And there's specific places that I love pushing, like places that are really good in Rochester, like Puerto Rican food, Dominican food, Jamaican food. I love talking about those kind of
have
places.
you been to Dimangu?
Of course. And I've
Place is
been
good.
and I've been to their original location that's owned by the same family.
Oh, really?
Called El Sabor de la Isla.
Where's
up on
that?
Norton. It's up on Norton Street in the city.
Ah.
So I'm an aficionado of going into the city and finding the cool stuff that's all around Rochester, not just in the white parts of Rochester.
Yeah.
People that say they live in the city, they live on Park Ave,
Right.
and they never go to the west side of the city, and it's really depressing because there's a lot of cool places to visit, and they're missing a lot of stuff.
I guess it's a good. So we're going to be on. We're on in Rochester, so probably we have the majority of listeners in Rochester. So, like, what's a hidden gem maybe that you know about, maybe that no one else would know about? I don't know if you want to blow it up now, because maybe you go there when you're,
my favorite thing is telling people about this stuff because they deserve to have better business. And a lot of the places are really busy already. Like, near where I used to work over on Lyle Ave, there's 2 Vietnamese places that live directly next to each other. It's Lyle Ave and Mount Reed. Mm-hmm. And in the same plaza, directly next to each other, different owners. And they're both Vietnamese places.
What's the name of it?
One is Saigon Pho, and the other is Nam Vang. Now, amongst the Rochester food writers, everybody knows about them now. But when I was starting to talk about them, and only a couple other people knew about them, well, somebody has to push those out, and somebody has to talk about them. Somebody has to let people know about these things.
Well, I personally have never been there
And
to either of those places, so I do love. Say it again.
Pho.
There's a comedian too who has a whole bit about pho. He's like, I'm gonna say pho, and I don't care. I'm supporting the Vietnamese community in my community by buying it already. Don't force me to say pho.
Actually, I heard an interview with somebody else and saying that that's not even technically correct,
right?
Because it's the inflection points that, as
when you speak Vietnamese and
English-speaking Americans, we don't speak with inflection nearly as much as Vietnamese dialect does, or Chinese. They speak with a lot of inflections, and they like rising noises. And I've tried to do it that way, and I just can't.
Yeah,
I butcher it when I try.
But I go along with the comedian. I mean, if you're already buying it, you already love the food. There's no other.
Yeah.
There's no greater compliment than enjoying the food of the.
And honestly, really enjoying it too, and going and asking questions and learning about it, and treating them with the respect they deserve for having an amazing cuisine. And you get to talk to people that you wouldn't normally talk to. Like, I can go there and talk to somebody because I've met them. I've had conversations with them before. And it's great.
Let me ask you quickly before we go, because we are running a little bit late here. So, your opinion on Yelp and what its utility, I guess, is
making podcasts
as you sip your as you sip your drink.
So, my opinion on Yelp. Like I said, I started on Yelp. I don't hate Yelp. I think there's a lot of merit to it still. I have friends that still write for Yelp. I'm friends with the community manager of Yelp. And I know plenty of people on there whose opinions I trust implicitly. I depend on them for certain kinds of cuisines, and their opinions they carry a lot of weight for me. The general issue is that most of the people who are writing do not know what they're talking about. And they have their own thoughts, but they're not well researched, and their opinions are based on their likes and dislikes, not based on objective quality of things. And you need to filter out what you're reading. I still think there's value in it. I still use it when I travel. I still use it here in town to try and discover new places because I can't be everywhere all at once.
Yep.
So I'll use it for all those things. And if I can see one of my friends who wrote there, well, I trust their opinions, and I know I'm getting good information. There's still value, but there's a lot of stuff you have to filter through now because there's so many more people writing.
Yeah, noise in there.
There's a lot of noise. There's some meat in there, but there's a lot of noise around the meat.
I found that, that's kind of where the internet tends to give everyone a voice equally, right? And so even if someone is ill-informed in this, and it almost creates really what a true democracy kind of is, right?
Yeah.
To its faults, where you see holy mackerel, if we were to actually have democracy in its true form, and everyone, for instance, there have been topics brought up let's vote online. The havoc that would be reached in our political system if every single individual, just because they have a computer, were able to actually vote, and not only vote, but each candidate would have their platform written next to it, what they kind of stand for in a couple of sentences.
It would make me so happy.
It would flip America on its end, because what's happening now is it's very, again, I come back to the distilled metaphor, but it seems to be distilled to those that are willing to go out and speak. The easier you make it, the more actual people are going to do it, and then you get the real opinion of the population, so I don't know, while people say, oh, let's have a true democracy, or let's have a true whatever it is, there are faults in everything, so
of course.
but I don't know. I think it would be would be fun to see the extent of that if I could watch from the outside and not be in the country while that
Not be a part of it.
My thoughts generally is better access for everybody to vote.
Yeah. Oh, I
And
mean,
it should be super easy for everybody to vote, and everybody should get a chance to say their piece and be able to talk about it. But we should still value those that are well researched, those that have dedicated their lives. I'm not talking about myself anymore. Talk about, whether it's politics or science or anything else. We should listen to those who are experts in their fields and give them more weight, and we should listen to their opinions.
And here's where in the last election too, this became painfully obvious as to why what happened with the election happened. And I hate getting into politics, but
I don't care.
The electoral college, right? I think that was the idea of it. Was like, okay, everyone's going to be voting, so we need to have some hand in it that's like not as democratic as we're making this whole thing out to be. And so now it's even more difficult, because if you were to democratize it to the level of you could just text in your vote for the president, I think that the results would potentially, cause problems.
It could be very different really quickly. And I think there's ways to get around that, of course. But, the biggest thing for me was I had the biggest trouble with competency. And I value people that look at science and trust what science is telling us. And trust what experts are telling us about the world and all these things. I value that really highly because I'm a logical person.
So here's the thing, though, too. Then you have the people that also live in this country that say, okay, well, the things that I value the most are, let's say, like a religious point of view or whatever. And so who's making the decision as to whose opinion on what is more competent is, right? So you introduce a whole nother problem to the situation. And there's no way, Chris, we're figuring this out on this podcast in the next 5 minutes. But I think it's an interesting question to pose, like, if we were to truly democratize, because at this point in history is when we truly have the technology and the capability to actually do that. And if we were to do that, what would be the consequences of it,
I'm hopeful. And, it's kind of an inflection point in the world right now. We're reaching that technology point where you can do that relatively securely, I think. People are super paranoid about it, obviously, with the issues with our last election and everything else. But we're nearing that point where hopefully things aren't going to be as hackable coming up. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to put out their perspectives in the best possible way. And yes, to your point, do I want, from my perspective, do I want the religious side of things dictating how we're doing things? No, absolutely not. Because that's not what I think. But also polling tends to agree with my perspective at this point. 60% of people agree with generally the things I agree with.
I was watching something, the Trump right now, there's the whole Russian meddling, all that kind of stuff going on, right? And what's interesting from my point of view, watching and I almost kind of feel like I'm watching from the outside to some extent, but looking at it, the way that they were meddling wasn't like they were hacking the votes, right? What they were doing was going on Facebook and putting like stories on there, right? That would gently influence people.
Super smart.
It's that easy to do that to people that they're influenced. And Facebook makes it increasingly easy because they put you into this bubble of your own, like you're almost in this loop of your own interests, right? Because you like things that you're interested in, you dislike.
We also self-select in our friend group typically.
Yeah, people that are similar.
You self-select because if I looked at my friend group, there's some homogeneity to it. We've got a lot of fairly highly educated people that tend to believe similar things that I believe.
Yeah.
And even if I get to my extended group, where maybe we're not at the same education level, but we still tend to believe the same things because we're at the same kind of places. It's the places I hang out which tend to attract certain kinds of people.
Right.
Which is why when I do go out to different places, I like having real conversations. If I'm going to these different restaurants, if I'm going to different parts of the city, if I'm volunteering somewhere, I like having real conversations with these people because when I hear their perspective, sometimes it's jarring.
Yeah.
Because they're very different than my own.
Yep.
And I think it's important to actually listen. And if you disagree, say so. Have a conversation. Don't just blindly agree with people for decorum's sake.
Right.
Have a conversation. I mean, be civil. Have a engaged, intelligent conversation with somebody. But actually talk to people and don't just ignore them and dismiss people because they're not like you. Well, have real conversations, and I think you end up learning something and hopefully teaching yourself something along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes, especially nowadays, I mean, people go into speaking with someone else, especially about a topic of discussion that they already have a built-in opinion of or an opinion they've developed about it, and they go in with the opinion, I'm going to convince that other person because my way is what I'm thinking about is the correct way of thinking about it, as opposed to going in and saying, like you had mentioned earlier, I'm going to listen to what this other person is saying and take that in and take all the facts of it and
Sure.
and hopefully come out on the end of it either with a better understanding of my own point of view as it being correct, or on the other side of it, like, hey, I actually learned something that was different from what I
Right,
initially thought.
We can tie it back to food, right? I have lots of opinions on food. I have strong opinions about food.
Right.
Many of them are backed up by, objective people and experts. And people don't enjoy what I like sometimes. And it's okay that they're wrong. It's okay that they like something that's wrong. That's fine. As long as they're honestly enjoying it and not just ignoring my side because it's more technical and it's maybe a little bit more difficult. It's fine. If you want to enjoy what you enjoy, great. Have a good time. I'm happy for you. But, I think there's technically right ways to do things, and I have disagreements with my friend Chris Clemens from Exploring Upstate about this all the time.
Why does that sound so familiar?
He does exploringupstate.com. He's upstate travel.
Yeah.
And pretty tied in around Rochester. But we disagree about this because he's an experiential kind of guy. And I have hard and fast thoughts about a lot of food, and I think there's value in technical correctness and a value in optimizing flavors and cooking techniques and all these things. I think there are best practices, and stories don't overwhelm. They don't overwhelm that. I have a few nostalgic things, so very few. Everything else, I mean, I'm pretty nasty.
Like
about.
what? Grilled cheese and tomato soup?
No, and I couldn't give two shits about grilled cheese and tomato soup. There's some dishes my mom makes that are I know I could make them better.
Yeah.
I know exactly how to make them better. I still can't change them. They need to be made the same way, and they need to be seasoned the same way.
Yeah.
And there's a few things I still enjoy that I shouldn't enjoy because they're awful. Like Mighty Taco is a great example. I grew up in Buffalo. Mighty Taco is not food.
Yeah.
I still like it. It's terrible.
The American cheese thing, because they came here, and actually I think they went under here in
they
Greece.
did. Yeah.
The one in Greece did.
Yeah.
But the American cheese thing did it. I'm like, I can't do the American cheese thing.
Yeah, and it's low grade American cheese too.
Not.
I mean the wilted lettuce and the tomatoes and the low quality beef.
But there's something to it too. I mean,
You
when that's what you're.
I grew up with it, and I have nostalgic thoughts about it. I remember going on the boat with my dad. We fished late at night. We'd go out at the end of the night, and you'd go to a Greek, Texas hot place, or you go to Mighty Taco, and it was 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. After hanging out with your dad and your brother late at night, you go to Mighty Taco. It's hard to get away from those memories of this is part of my childhood. I can still enjoy it, even though I know it's just hot garbage.
So here's what Chris is telling us here on the podcast. So Mighty Taco is his number one place out of any food. I'm joking. Highly. So take that recommendation. No,
Yeah.
I'm just
To summarize Chris Lindstrom's experience,
right.
he doesn't like
Mighty
farm.
Taco.
He loves Mighty Taco.
Right.
And he hates America.
And he's a curler.
And he's a
He is
curler.
He's a curler.
That's also true.
Chris, can you pimp out all your wares and what you're doing now in town one more time for
I
us?
think I should while I'm here. So, again, my name is Chris Lindstrom. You can find me at foodabouttown.com. Food About Town on Facebook. I'm also at Stromie, that's STROMIE, on Twitter and Instagram. And my startup project is Frankly, that's PHRANKLY.com. to find out where your favorite restaurants buy their stuff from and where to buy your favorite local goods all around Rochester and soon all around the country.
That's pretty cool, yeah. Because if you don't know where your favorite restaurant gets their stuff from, that's the perfect way. I mean, I've got ins on this stuff, but some people don't. So Chris, again, thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it, and I know we've moved on here to a little bit of Japanese whiskey in the end here, but the Still House did us pretty good for an hour there. I mean, it did its job.
It did its job.
The bottle's super cool.
Did.
If you like fruited moonshines, check out Still House.
And jumping into pools.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you like jumping into pools wildly, Sarah. That's perfect.
Yep.
So, all right, guys. Thank you so much again, Chris, for coming in, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
You are listening to 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester, New York.
Extreme Independent Radio.
Worldwide, you can find us online at 1009wxir.com.
Infiltrate Radio.